keeping in mind our goal. And our goal is clearly not to find a qualified and interested U.S. worker.
Greetings, my friends. After a long hiatus, Rollin' Rambles is back in production. I guess it wasn't really that long of a hiatus, but I haven't really been feeling up to making these for a little while. I just needed a bit of a break, and I've had about 4 protein shakes today, and I feel great. So, today, Based Santa, with his lovely luscious locks, is going to give a based take that some of you are going to be really happy about, and some of you will very much not. And that can be summed up, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, in this simple statement. You don't get to benefit from my values when you violate my values. See, the thing that's been going around in the news, they've kind of gone away from it today as of this recording, but the thing that's been going around for a week or so is this notion of due process and theatrics in U.S. politics about a Venezuelan gang member, illegal alien that had final orders of deportation, being deported from the country. As it turns out, the supposed order that was supposed to, that he wasn't supposed to be deported back to El Salvador. It didn't say El Salvador, it said Guatemala, so that was a lie. It turned out the whole premise that it was ordered that it not happen be a lie. It was a lie the whole time. And who would have guessed? And politicians lying? What? That's just not a thing that happens. So yeah, politicians lied. What a shock. But one of the things that has been banging around in the news as a result of this and, several other things, mostly around the question of illegal aliens entering the United States, has been this sudden, inexplicable, vigorous, renewed interest in the concept of due process, of getting your day in court. And very hyperbolic, ridiculous assertions that if you under the regime of Trump, now they can just they'll just show up in the house or at your house in the middle of the night and take you away if they just decide to call you an illegal alien, when obviously that is not the case. This video, however, is not actually about any of this. This is a philosophical video, not a legal one. I'm not here to discuss how things legally on the books technically may be. I'm here to discuss how things should be, and probably pass a few cars that are going too slow in the process. See, that's the current legal system, and this is where it needs to be when dealing with this issue. So one of the big problems is that due process takes a lot of time and resources. And one of the kinks in this whole due process chain is that due process was completely thrown out the window in the course of allowing the people in question into the United States. The United States due process for being allowed in requires that you go through several hoops to actually be here and stay here. And those hoops were ignored or the definitions or whatever stretched to allow a maximal number of people to cross the United States border and be here under false asylum claims, or it doesn't really matter. They just came, flooded. They could have been granted asylum under false pretenses, or they could have not. But the bottom line is there was a flood of illegal aliens entering the United States in violation of the laws and in violation of the principles that make up how the country is supposed to be run. And the problem with due process is that you don't get to violate due process in one direction, then demand due process in the other direction. You don't get to violate the fundamental principles of the values that make up the United States and then demand the full protection of the laws of the United States. Now, what that means is, in short, these people were allowed in without proper due process. These people were illegally, well, I don't know that we can in every case say illegally, as in some cases the laws were stretched or temporarily augmented to allow it. However, certainly immorally and unethically allowed into the country in massive quantities. Now, the problem is that that is not part of the values. You do not have a nation if anybody can come and go as they please. And that was what was allowed to happen. Those who are allowed in without due process can be kicked out without due process. Now, how do you deal with the problem that, well, now anybody that they say was allowed in without due process can be kicked back out without due process? And you know, there is no good answer to that question. Unfortunately, the problem is that you would have to trust the system, and systems have a nasty tendency of being abused by a lot of people. But at the same time, it's kind of like if you have cancer, you don't worry about like one specific spot the cancer is. You want to get rid of all the cancer. And there might be some serious damage to some nearby tissue in the process of removing all the cancer. But you have to remove all the cancer or there's really not much of a point. And that is exactly what I'm saying in regard to this situation. The people who are allowed in outside of our moral process, our ethical process, even if the legal process was beaten, hammered, reinterpreted and such to allow them in, they don't get due process. They don't get due process because due process was never a part of the equation. They were allowed in violation of the general morality of the people of the United States. And as such, they don't get to stay. Goodbye. And yes, some innocent people may be swept up in it. And that is unfortunate, and it's sad, and in general, under normal circumstances, I would say that that's not okay. That normal people being swept up in this is a violation of their rights. But we're not living under a normal situation. We are not living with a normal series of circumstances. We are living in the aftermath of the violation of fundamental principles. And that violation, well, if the violation of my fundamental principles happens, I don't have to then suddenly adhere to my principles in order to deal with it, especially when it's such an egregious violation. So if something is legal, it doesn't make it moral. If something is legal, it doesn't make it ethical. Just because some people made up a rule that something's okay doesn't mean that that thing is actually okay, even if it fits within the rules. And yes, there are, in fact, some laws that are not, that are immoral or unethical, and therefore abiding by those laws is immoral and unethical. Now, the right to due process is not immoral or unethical, and I don't have a problem under normal circumstances giving everyone their right to due process. The, potential years, unfortunately, that it can take for immigration cases to crank through. However, it's important that you understand exactly how bad the problem really is. We are talking about several million migrants. The multiplication on the capacity of the immigration court system times the number of cases that would be involved means that even if the system operated on all cylinders, maximum efficiency, operated 24/7, 365, it would take centuries to give every single person who came here illegally due process to be kicked out legally. Under such circumstances, you do not wait. You apply that chemotherapy or that radiotherapy to kill that cancer. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with Donald Trump violating my fundamental principles because my fundamental principles were violated in the first place by Joseph R. Biden. And because Joe Biden violated my principles to allow all of these people to come in and shit up my house illegally, I have no problem with someone else coming in after that grabbing all of those people that came in illegally and dragging them out by their necks. I don't want these people to be here. Nobody who is a remotely sane American citizen or a legal immigrant, someone who actually followed the process, someone who gave the same courtesy of following the due process as what I would extend back to them. None of these people want illegal aliens to be here, especially undocumented, unknown illegal aliens with God knows what they're going to do, God knows what their intentions are. A whole lot of them are actually economic migrants. A whole lot of them are military-aged young males that are quite capable. It really is tantamount to an invasion. And you don't have an invading force slowly fill up your country and then go, oh, well, the people that are here to take over, we got to give them their due process. And no, you whip out the guns and tell them to go home. That's how you handle an invading force. The problem is this is not the kind of invading force that we would normally think of, like in most of human history. It's not common for the invading force to creep in one at a time and be accepted by the native population. And by native population, I mean the people who have rightfully won the right to be there. It's not normal to just let them slowly come in, fill up the place, and then take over. And yet, it's happening. It's absolutely happening. It's already happened in Canada. In Canada, Ontario's choices are a bunch of Indians. Yeah, a bunch of Indians. In Canada, Canada, the place that's got a bunch of British and French and otherwise really strong European heritage, and has some native Canadians. I believe that, I don't know everything about them, but we used to call them Eskimos, and they're just natives, whatever, doesn't matter. But the point is there's two major ethnic groups, and yet somehow in Canada, the forerunners to run everything have all become Indian. The population has extremely rapidly been replaced with Indians. Now, yes, I know that Canada is not the United States yet. I know that Canada isn't the 51st state, as it is rumored to become, yet. I have actually thought for a long time that it would make a lot of sense for Canada to want to become a series of states that are part of the U.S., because then they would actually have freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, and they couldn't just have the government freeze their bank accounts because they were protesting. That would be really nice, wouldn't it? Over the past several decades, Canada has basically become an amplified version of what the left in America has been doing to the United States. Canada basically is where we would be if we kept down the same path. And that's kind of the problem. We don't want to go down the same path. America is for Americans. The United States is for United States citizens and people who have legally immigrated here. If you are here on a visa, while you still have the rights and protections under our laws that the visa grants you, if you overstay your visa, you're an illegal alien and you need to go. And no, I don't think that illegal aliens, documented to be illegal aliens, or even if it's just a person who has no documentation and no clear signs that they live here, like if someone doesn't speak English and there's no fingerprints in the system, there's no pictures that match them, you can't figure out who they are, and they don't even speak English, that's a lot of signs that they aren't from here, don't belong here, they need to go somewhere else. And that's it. If you don't protect your nation, you have no nation. A nation without borders is not a nation at all. And if you allow 2 million, 3 million, some people say it could be 10 million illegals that came here. If you allow that many people from other cultures that are not necessarily compatible with your own into your country, then you have to take drastic actions to get rid of them. And yeah, I know that it's very easy to take any of this and clip it up and say, the white male, old-looking dude with the silver hair, he's just over here saying all these racist things. No, I'm not saying racist things. In fact, if someone goes to the trouble of following the legal immigration process in the United States, I argue that they have more of a right to be here than some citizens. There are some citizens I would personally not mind seeing deported. There are quite a few citizens in inner cities that I think should definitely be deported, that should probably go live in some El Salvadorian prison somewhere. There are lots of gangbangers that nobody ever talks about and that nobody asks questions about and that kill tons of people every year, usually of the same race as themselves. And all of them need to go somewhere else. I don't want people who commit serious crimes on a regular basis to live here, to be able to access the American populace. But that's what precisely was allowed in. And the problem, ultimately, comes down to toxic empathy. This notion that somehow if you let these people in, that you're being kind. But look, not everybody is Aladdin. In fact, most people aren't Aladdin. Most people are out for themselves, and they were brought up in certain cultures that teach them certain moral ways, that moral fundamentals as to how to live their lives and how to interact with others. And I'm going to tell you right now, if someone grew up in a gang, I don't want them here. I don't want them to come here. If someone grew up in poor conditions where they stole all the time, in a culture that's very fundamentally different and has some interesting beliefs about women and children and credit and God knows what else. There is no shortage of differences between cultures in areas like this that make them incompatible. I don't want those people to be coming here without some severe vetting. Like, there's just no way that I would allow these people in my house. And in fact, that is my ultimate solution. I think that the people that these wackadoodle leftists fight so hard to keep in the United States of America, those people should be housed, forcibly housed, inside the homes of these Democrat representatives that are running around screaming, bring the gang member that rapes children and murders people, and we know this, and that had a final order of deportation. Bring them back. Let them stay. Be compassionate. Well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is, asshole? Why don't you house them? Why? This is the problem. These people are like, oh, I'm a good person. Look at what a good person I am. I have signaled my virtue so loudly. Look at how great I am for saying that we should be compassionate to all humans. We're all part of the same human race, and everything is fine and dandy, and the future will be powered by puppies, rainbows, sugar farts, and fireflies. Yeah, look at how good of a person I am. I'm so great. Because I have compassion for my fellow human, as evidenced in all of this virtue signaling I'm doing. But the second you say, okay, I want you to take these people that you say you have so much compassion for and house them in your spare room, in your gated community, borders. The second you do that, oh, well, no, I didn't say all that. I mean, I don't have room. I need that room for something. I don't have room. I can't help. Let's not get carried away. The only people who should actually have to suffer the consequences of that virtue signaling is you and me and everybody else that isn't part of their virtue signaling clique. If you're not one of the anointed ones, if you're not one of these wealthy, upper middle class, gated community, affluenza pricks that runs everything, if you're not one of these elites, then you're the one who should bear the brunt of their policies to show how good they are. We're good people. Now you do the work. No, I won't do the work. I'm going to drag that person out the front door and I'm going to kick him out. And if you try to put him back, then in the middle of the night, I'm going to brown bag them and you can deal with it. They can go live under a lake for all I care. I don't care about other people. And that's the fundamental problem, is that I don't have to care about some random other person. But for some reason, you need other people to think you do. But you don't. You don't actually care about them. You care about the way other people in your clique, in your strata, in your friend group, your colleagues, your peers. You care about how they view you. You're not doing this because you have genuine convictions. You've manufactured those convictions in your mind because you have to play the part. You have to be performative. Performative outrage fueled by toxic empathy, all built on a giant layer of bullshit that you fed yourself so that other people think you're a good person. You're not a good person. You probably never will be a good person. You wouldn't know a good person if they snuggled up next to you and said, "Hi, I'm an angel made of feathers and I feel soft and I smell great." You would think that it was Satan incarnate trying to set you on fire. So don't give me this crap about how, "Oh, I'm so empathetic and I care about humans." At the end of the day, we all hold a set of values, but in America, there are a fundamental core set of values we're all supposed to uphold. And one of those values is the right to due process. The right that if you are accused of some wrongdoing, you get your day in court, you face your accuser, and you're tried by a jury of your peers. You get to basically have 12 other people that are similar to you, in theory at least, judge what's going on and make the decision. Not just some bureaucrat somewhere who can judge however they wish. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to matter. Oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention earlier in this video. Where was all this screeching about the right to due process when Maxine Waters was in front of the courthouse during the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, screeching that we're going to let them know that there will be hell to pay if we don't get the result we want? That seems like a pretty severe, what is the word? Is it abdication? I can't remember. But that seems like you're curtailing Kyle Rittenhouse's right to a free trial pretty hard, Maxine Waters. I'm surprised this woman hasn't been locked up yet, or worse, because somehow this woman runs around screaming in front of courthouses that they better do what she wants, riling up a mob. You know, you're running around threatening the jury. Yeah, okay. So where's all that due process? Oh, wait, but that's right. That's right. This is some white kid. This is some young white kid from the suburbs. And you've been told by some other person with no evidence whatsoever that he's running around shooting black kids for fun or whatever. Yeah, that's what's fueling you. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you're going to show up to court, and you're going to stand around outside the courthouse and say, if we don't get the result we want, it's going to be bad for you. So where was the due process then? I guess it doesn't matter. Oh, wait, how about that Waukesha killer? Remember the guy that drove all the stuff, that drove the SUV or whatever through Waukesha and mowed over a whole bunch of people? Where was the due process then? For some reason, the Waukesha guy, where did that story go? I don't even know what happened with it because it all got swept under the rug real quick once they found out it wasn't a white guy. All of a sudden, it's a car that just did it of its own volition, right? Where did that go? Where was the due process for all the people that were murdered? I don't know. Where did that go? Where is the due process? To this day, where's all that due process for all those January 6th defendants? Where was the due process when they were locked up in jail and left in jail for years with no charges being brought? That's a direct violation of the rarely discussed and mentioned right to a speedy public trial. You have the right to a speedy trial. Well, being locked in jail for 3 years with no charges, that is not a speedy trial. That is an absolute violation of constitutional rights. And every single one of those people that was locked up and not charged with anything should be given $1 million. I'm totally fine with that. We waste more money than that on transgender operas in God knows where out there in the world. So I think that we should be able to compensate those people for losing time they'll never be able to get back in their lives because of a gross violation of their constitutional rights. For some reason, though, that I'll never understand, other than that it's a cult, the left in America has decided that it's more important to give illegal aliens that were allowed to come in violation of both our principles and probably the law, For some reason, those illegals are allowed to have far more care and worry about their right for due process and more attention. Just everything should be given to them. But when it comes to actual United States citizens that are suffering actual violations of their real rights, nobody says anything. Nobody cares. The only people who care, drowned out by the mainstream media and their cronies that previously, up until very recently, controlled basically all social media as well. See, this is the thing. This video, the whole point of it is just my principles are important to me. But you can't violate my principles and then get the benefit of my principles. And that's exactly what this whole due process argument really is. They don't give a rat's ass about due process when it's politically expedient to not give a rat's ass about due process. They only give a rat's ass about due process when it benefits them to do so. And that's a theme that you'll notice. You can't unevenly apply it. Either all of it's okay or none of it's okay. That's a concept called equal protection under the law. Maybe you losers might figure that out at some point. Granting a certain set of people the ability to come in here without following the law and then expecting us to have some sort of a problem with someone sweeping them back out without following the law, that's kind of stupid. There's no reason that we should have to accept this whole due process push. It doesn't make any sense. Because once my principles have already been violated, I'm just going to shove you out the door and down the stairs. I'm not going to wait for the cops to show up and do it for me and follow a process. I'm going to push you out. You know, and this is the thing. Like, for example, with squatters. You know, if you have a legit squatter, you don't wait for the cops to show up. The squatters show a fake lease, and then because the laws have been tailored unjustly to enable the squatting, you don't just stand there and let the cops arrest you for hassling the person who's effectively stealing your home. No, you hire up a gang of the boys to go in there in the middle of the night, drag them out of bed, throw them in the back of a van, and empty out the house and take them a long, long way away before dumping them somewhere so that they are no longer an issue. That's how you deal with that problem. And it doesn't matter at that point what they have to say about some leases. And that's the thing. Laws that are bad are meant to be broken. Now, this is not to say that it's some sort of bad thing that tenants have strong protections in the United States. But at the same time, whenever those tenant protections are very obviously being used to enable squatting, no, that's a problem. And sometimes the only solution to the problem is extrajudicial. In this case, you have an invading force. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to kick them back out. I'm going to drag them kicking and screaming back across the threshold until they're gone. And you know what? I can live with that. And you should be able to live with that too. And the people who say that that's unjust and are now suddenly, after all of this time, violating all of these principles that they supposedly also share with me, after all of these people that go against everything that I stand for, now suddenly they want the protection of the same things that they claim to stand for, but clearly don't? No. I am going to force you to live by your principles, not my principles. And not the principles you claim to support, but the principles that you have demonstrated through your actions you actually, genuinely support. If you have principles where it's okay for the law to be applied selectively to only some groups but not others, or it's okay to allow people in illegally, immorally, unethically, but it's not okay to kick them back out illegally, immorally, unethically, no, I'm not going to give you that protection. No one should give you that protection. At that point, you go. And frankly, I would take it a step further. I would say that anybody who violates my principles in that way, anybody who violates the fundamental principles behind the United States, they don't belong here, and they should be kicked out too. But, as always, the problem is that because they are here legally, And because they are citizens, and even though they have scummy views, they do have the right to freedom of speech and due process. And so I can't get rid of them only because my principles at least protect them for now. Do you share the same principles? Should they protect them? That's a discussion for another day. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say, what I've been trying to say for God knows how long I've been recording this is, you don't get to violate my principles and benefit from my principles. Donald Trump is well within his rights to drag millions of illegal alien, intruder, invader, whatevers out of the country, kicking and screaming about their rights all day long until the problem that Joe Biden set in motion illegally, immorally, unethically, allowing them in, has been corrected. And I'm fine with that, and I can live with that. And if you can't, then frankly, you're a moron, and you don't belong here. Why don't you move to a country that is more in line with your values? Let's say Germany, or really any European country that is also now filled with migrants from incompatible cultures. Or how about Sweden? Yeah, that's it. Why don't you guys who disagree with me move to Sweden? Sweden is a country that espouses all of your wonderful progressive values, and that's also why they're the rape capital of the world. So enjoy your acid attacks, brutal beatings and murders, rapes, and no-go zones, because that's in line with your principles, the principles that you actually live, rather than the ones that you say that you espouse. Like, comment, subscribe, all that crap. And let me know what you think down below. I already have a few screen names in my head for the people that will be leaving comments. I'm pretty sure I know what they're going to say, too. And I'm so old, I just called it a screen name instead of a handle, although handle's even older than screen name. Anyway, I'm off in the weeds again. If you want to hear all about what messengers were like back in the early 2000s, let me know. Maybe I'll make a video about that. Take it easy.